let us start. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. So my name is Ankita and I'm Regional Manager for Africa in Frappe. I look actively into business and marketing enablements for the community. In today's session, we have Krishank Pawar joining us from Grunt. So let me give you a bit background about him. So he's a chief training officer at Grunt, and Grunt is a community contributor, and he's a distinguished chartered accountant with over of experience in ERP technologies, including Oracle, SAP, and ERPNext. So he has extensive background working across diverse industries such as EPC, healthcare, banking, and IT. So thank you, Krishan, for joining the session. It'd be really nice if you can introduce yourself before we start the session, and then we can start with the presentation today.
Oh, absolutely. So firstly, I want to thank you all for the opportunity for hearing us out as to what we have to offer for the EPC industry, especially Frappe and all the 31 participants which we've joined in the meeting. So, I mean, Ankita has given a fair overview about my background, although I may not say distinguished, but yes, I do have some experience with ERP implementations, both from large ERP implementations, including SAP and Oracle, as well as ERP implementations of ERPNext across various industries, including EPC. So we see a very strong use case where we can use ERPNext, especially to manage some of the core competencies that an EPC industry would require. And that's what we want to try to highlight, or rather demonstrate to you all here today. And so that it kind of forces you to think about how this can be positioned within your organization and how it can bring about certain value within your organization. So yeah, that's all for the intro. Let me know when we're ready to get started.
So yeah, we can start with the presentation. Meanwhile, since we cannot run a complete introduction session, it would be really wonderful if every one of you can just introduce yourself in the chat box. It would be really nice to hear from you as well. And moreover, in case you have any queries, please share your queries in the chat box so that we can answer them. And if time permits, we'll take a quick Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And in between also, we'll take some breaks to answer your queries as well. So let's get started. So over to you, Krishan.
Excellent. Thank you. Just let me know when you're able to see the screen. Just try to hide this. Give me a second.
Yes, your screen is visible.
All right. Try to hide this as well. All right, perfect. So guys, thanks for joining in. Now, I presume that most of us who are on this call here today either belong or rather work within the EPC industry, or alternatively have an inclination to start using ERPNext for such kind of industry implementations which are focused on the EPC piece, right? So for those who may not be aware of the full form of EPC, EPC stands for engineering, procurement, and construction, right? And this is particularly for the real estate people. And this is particularly for our folks in real estate. And this system, given the kind of functionalities that we have, we want to take you through our agenda today, where we're going to cover the introduction, of course, about what ERPNext is, which I assume most of us here may be aware. However, we'll touch base a bit upon what we can expect from the system, and then we'll cover some of the critical areas that you will be tracking in any EPC industry or any kind of a construction business, right? So whether that's effectively managing your projects, your construction projects, whether that's effectively managing the site and the construction management therein, whether it's managing your procurement and inventory related to that particular building or that particular site which we are developing. Now, keep in mind, this could this could not only be limited to real estate buildings, could be corporates, corporate constructions, could be um, constructions related to infrastructure such as roads and so on and so forth, right? So the principles of construction are essentially the same across all these different verticals within the EPC industry, right? And then finally, we'll move into some of the operational related things like the procurement, the sales and inquiry management. And then, of course, we'll close up with the accounting, how all this ties in to your accounting, right? Now, keep in mind that these modules that we are going to see going ahead, these modules can be used independently or they can be used in collaboration with your existing, let's say your finance system. So regardless of which finance system you're on, if you want your construction piece to be managed well so that you can optimize your revenue and reduce your costs, we can very well use the modules in here to plug into your existing accounting base so that you have some kind of a seamless workflow between both the systems. All right. So with that, let me just quickly enter into what ERPNext is. Now, I think most of you may have already seen this landing page that I'm showing you, rather the screen that you see in front of you is what we call as the landing page, right? Now, the landing page within ERPNext is something that enables us to personalize our ERP journey based on what we as a user of the ERP system will mainly interact with, right? So when you look at the complete modular stack of ERPNext, it has something for all your needs, including an accounting piece. It completely manages your procurement. It has a CRM and a sales module, which are again completely interlinked. And of course, all your inventory, your assets, your quality parameters, the most important part, your projects or the construction projects, which you're going to be managing using our product. And of course, there are many ancillary modules like support, like HR, payroll, and so on and so forth, right? So the aim of ERPNext is to essentially give the EPC industry a single source of truth where you can manage all your data relating to your construction business in one single system, right? So that all your reporting is streamlined, all the trainings are streamlined, the adoption of the system becomes easier, and there's a whole bunch of different benefits which you may, which you may notice once you come into the, or rather once you adopt this particular system, right? Once you adopt this particular system. So there's a whole different set of benefits that come by having a single source of truth when it comes to managing all your different construction projects with their procurement, with their inventory, with the HR payroll and the labor related expenses, and also any kind of ancillary feature like a support module, which can give you kind of a contact center or an incident management system, right? To help you highlight any kind of incidences which happen throughout the journey of your construction project. So this is just a quick overview. Now keep in mind that what you see here on the home screen is completely personalizable. So you can edit the workspaces to suit your requirements. You can add new, you can add new sections. You can see there are multiple templates which are ready available. Just simply click and deploy, right? So if you want to create new shortcuts, if you want to add some charts, if you want to remove certain elements from the front end, all these things are very possible in terms of personalization when it comes to ERPNext, right? So a lot of our customers, what we've seen them do is just, other than simply having modules over here, they create workspaces, which are these that you see on the left. So a lot of our customers, they create workspaces which are relevant to their organization, right? So for an EPC industry, you may have one workspace which is particularly for supervisors or site supervisors. You may have one workspace which is particularly for the procurement team, which is going to be managing the material from and to the site, right? So there can be multiple customized workspaces that we make, and that's highly recommended. That when we, when we do a project for you on your construction industry customers, this is how we get the adoptability of the system much quickly, right? We categorize, we personalize, and we deploy the framework of the system in a way which makes sense to every user who logs in, right? Now, let's get into our first part of the agenda, which is the effective project management. And this is the cornerstone of how we manage every construction project within the system, right? So we'll start off by creating a project and assigning various tasks to that project. And then we'll see how we can track the project progress, how we can track the project's costing. Keep in mind, one of the biggest pain points we've seen in the EPC industry is people not having visibility into the indirect costs that are borne on that particular project, right? So there's a lot of shared resources when it comes to EPC, and indirect cost tracking per unit that you're going to sell is of absolute importance, right? Absolutely important that we have unit-wise tracking. So if you have, let's say, a building, you're constructing a building which is 7, 10, 15, 100 floors, whatever, and you have maybe one residential unit on each floor, then it will be absolutely critical for us to understand what the costing of this floor is. What is the costing in terms of direct costs? What is the costing in terms of indirect costs? So that we can have an appropriate calculation of margins when we go ahead and we sell our unit, or sell our property, or sell our commercial building which we have constructed, right? We'll jump back into the system, and to start off with, we'll go into the projects module that you see here. Now, under projects, this is where we define all the construction projects that we're going to enter into. So for an example, we can just click add a project and create a new one. I've created a one previously called as Frappe Tower, right? Now, this is a tower that we're going to make in India, for example. So there are just some basic details about this particular project. If you're a contractor and you're making the project for a customer, then you can tag those customer related details over here as well, right? And you can also have a prospective start and end date for this particular project, all while tracking all your actual costs as well as the margins that you have within this construction project of yours, right? So this will give you a dashboard, or a bird's eye view rather, of what the project health is at the moment, right? Now, within every project, the way this particular system has been built, it's been built on a work breakdown structure format. So what this allows us to do is allows us to track tasks within every project, which will help us understand the fulfillment of that project. So I'll just jump into my view here, and Frappe supports, or rather ERPNext supports multiple views in which you can view data. One of those is the task or the tree view that you see here, right? So here we have our Frappe Tower, and under that Frappe Tower, there are 7 critical phases which I want to track in order to ensure that I've completed my project within the timelines and I've completed them within the appropriate costs, right? So here we have the phase where we dig the foundation. Then we add the ground floor, the first floor, second floor, third floor. And for this example, we've taken a 7-floor building just to keep it simple, right? Now, within the foundation, I want to track more subtasks, and I can break this up to as granular as I require my costing to be, right? So if for the foundation, I want to track the excavation of the foundation. After the excavation is completed, there would be pouring of concrete, and then there would be a period where the concrete that we've poured is cured using different chemicals. And once that foundation is built, then we'll start with the first floor, where we go ahead and we add the slab formwork for the first floor, right? So we add the formwork followed by certain reinforcements. Then we do the concreting. followed by the columns as well, right? So this is just a sample of a building project and some of the critical activities within that construction project that any EPC industry would like to track, right? Now, the bigger your project, the more this bifurcation will be, and there could be multiple levels in this. So currently we just have 1 and 2 levels. We can extend up to as many levels as you like, right? So there's no limitations on how granular we want to go. It simply allows you to have the kind of hierarchy that you want in terms of your reporting and your costing. It's very easy to add new tasks as well. Just click on the parent, or rather click on the higher level where you want to add it, and just hit on the add child button, and this will allow you to add one more task. Now, when we look at tasks, what all do we see within the task? Within the task, we can see certain important parameters like the priority, what is the current status of that particular task. Similarly, what are the expected timelines? You can see an expected start, expected end date. You can give some task details and descriptions in here, right? And of course, if there's any cost that has been loaded onto this particular task, that we will be able to track very easily. All right. So let's start off with a quick sample where we are building this Frappe tower over here. And to build this Frappe tower, this is our project plan, right? Now, as a project manager, I can easily view a Gantt chart as well, so that we can quickly have a look at, all the different tasks which are being carried out. So I can see here that my entire foundation is going to happen from the 16th of July all the way till the 5th of August. And within that time frame, I'll be doing excavation, I'll be doing concreting, and I'll be doing curing as well. So you can see these timelines. Now, if I want to edit the timelines, if I want to change them, if I want to reduce them, I can move them around. I have the flexibility to do all these things directly from my Gantt, right? So you just imagine how easy it makes managing the project. For example, here we have a ground floor. Now, within the ground floor, we will first start off with the formwork, then we'll move into reinforcements. After reinforcements, we'll move into the concrete pouring, which you can see is happening from the 20th of August all the way till here, right? So you can see all the details here. And if you want to go ahead into the the task and look into the details of the task, you can just simply click on that particular task. It'll drill down all the way from the Gantt, right? So the system has a lot of flexibility in helping us achieve certain outcomes through various modes, right? There's not one particular kind of a navigation that you just have to remember, which is the problem we feel with many of the other, core construction kind of products that have been released in the market of late, right? So they have a very large learning curve, which we are trying to get rid of using this particular one, right? So you can see there are multiple, views you can have. As a project manager, what's important for you is a Gantt view as well. So let's say, for example, this is my Frappe Tower Gantt. I want to make this, and this is for my Frappe Tower Kanban. All right. So we simply hit save, and what this does is it categorizes the entire project into different tasks and into different buckets. So I can see how many of my projects tasks are still open, how many are we currently working on, how many are pending review from the supervisor, and how many have gone into overdue. And like this, there are many tasks that you can track, including how many are completed, how many have been canceled, and so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can slice and dice your data when it comes to ERPNext. This is just one of those examples. Because we are heavily limited on time, we'll try to take you through some of the highlights of it as soon as possible, right? Now let's get started with our project, wherein, look at the Gantt chart. So let's get started our project where we do the excavation, all right? So whenever we start the excavation, the first thing that you will notice is we will be assigning those tasks to the relevant supervisors, right? Now let's say this is a I am a supervisor who's signed into the system, and I want to start my foundation process, right? So what I would first do is I will assign it to my supervisor, who in this case is Mel, right? So Mel is the supervisor, she's the site supervisor, who's going to be overlooking the entire excavation of this particular um, piece, right? Of this particular piece, right? Now, from here, what will happen is Mel will have a look at the timelines. They'll say, all right, we expect it to start on the 7th and expected end date is 22nd. And what I'll do now is I'll change it to working, right? So this is the first thing that we do, where we capture the start date of this particular task, right? So our first thing that we're doing is we're doing the excavation, and we have assigned it to Mel, right? Now Mel will have a look at this and she'll say, all right, this is started, we've started working on this. And now as the working is going on a daily basis, what Mel can do is she can enter the entire labor. She can enter the entire, labor times against this particular task, right? Now, when we are doing excavation, for example, there are two critical components. One is the labor that will be working, or the man force that will be working. And the second is the machinery that we are going to hire in order to do this kind of a excavation process, right? Now, in order to track your internal labor costs or your internal resource costs, what Mel will do as a manager is, let's say we have deployed around 5 people, okay, on the site to overlook, or rather to help in the excavation. Mel at any given point can raise timesheets against this particular task. Okay, Mel can raise timesheets against this particular task. Okay, so here we can see that either we can raise the timesheet for one employee at a time, or Mel, being a supervisor, can raise it for the entire day in one go itself, right? So that she's not burdened with filling timesheets again and again and again. And keep in mind that all this can happen as easily through your mobile phone as well, without any kind of separate application to download, right? So a lot of the times we see our clients say, that this particular employee doesn't have space on their phone, or their phone is not working properly, or there's some issue with the operating system of their phone. So we've tried to get rid of all those issues by creating a web browser based application. And that web browser based application is what is going to allow us to uh, fill in all these details directly from your phone within seconds, right? So let's say we are now filling in the details for today. So we've just created a sample activity called a site labor activity. We can now map this site labor activity to our task and also to our project, right? So from here, we can say, all right, that today, each labor, we can have a blanket rate, right? So we can say that the work started at 10 a.m. on the 17th, right? And each labor has worked 8 hours, for example. So all we have to do is simply assign the task. So let's say the task is foundation excavation, right? Foundation excavation is the task against which this work is done. So they put 8 hours over here, maybe for one labor, and then we can simply duplicate it for all the different manpower or people power that we have on that particular site. So you see, it's very easy to manage this kind of data. Maybe one person has worked 8 hours, another person has worked 4 hours, another has worked 5 hours, another worked just 1 hour, right? So all these working hours is 18 total working hours, which are now going to be allocated to the project against this particular task, right? Against this particular task, which is nothing but our excavation of the foundation task, right? So here I can automatically see that based on the hours, the system is automatically allocating a particular cost to that task as well, right? If you want to do billing from here, which normally does not happen in EPC industries, we can do that as well, but that's mainly for SaaS based kind of industries in that way, right? So let's go ahead and save this timesheet. And what this will do is it will add a prospective cost of this amount onto my project of 900, right? So you can see I've already created a couple of different timesheets earlier against the same project. right? And you can have a look at the report view to get more details about it. So you can see, what was submitted against which, how many hours was submitted, when it was submitted, how many total working hours were allocated towards that task, so that whenever you go back into your project, right now, whenever you go back into your project, let's say Frappe Tower, here under the costing, I can see that my costing has now increased by 900, right? So earlier it was kept at 1200 rupees and now it's become 2100, right? Again, for the next particular task, now again, the next day, for example, um, Mel wants to record the timesheet for all the employees. We can do that for the next day as well, simply by clicking the plus button. And we choose our organization. Do keep in mind it supports multi company kind of structures, and here we can have the timing for the next day as well. Let's say the 8th, right? And we can add our own time over here, like so. All right, and here we can add the hours that that particular person has worked for that task, or rather for that excavation activity, right? So now you can see there's an additional cost of 350, which is going to be loaded. All I have to do is simply save and submit this particular record. And now I can go back to my project and have a look at the updated cost. So you can just refresh that for a second. So now you can see that that additional cost has also been loaded over here. It was 2100 earlier, now it's 2450, right? So it's very seamless and it tries to kind of democratize your data input to different people. So at the site itself, as the work is going on, or rather when the work is completed, in a matter of seconds, the site supervisor can simply upload via their phone all the different times that have been taken, or rather the time that people take in order to complete this project. And this will load your direct costs, right, onto the project. This will load all your direct costs into the project. Similarly, as a site supervisor, if they want to make any kind of expense claims, right, if they want to make any kind of expense claims, now this is very critical, because a site supervisor who has to travel daily, who has to spend money out of their pocket, needs to be reimbursed, right? And that reimbursement is something that we can streamline directly into our system as well. Okay, we can streamline that directly into our system. So just give me 1 second. Let me just open the task list. I think internet's become a little slow. Second. Oh, sorry. All right, perfect. I think it's working now, right? So if during the excavation, Mel had faced any kind of expenses and travel, maybe some food spends, or any other kind of out-of-pocket expenses that that they needed, they can come in here and they can raise an expense claim against that as well. Now, this expense claim will also automatically be credited towards the cost of that project, right? Automatically, we can assign it towards the cost of that particular project, right? So you can see here, we're assigning it towards that task, towards this particular project. And I can have different claim types. You can do food, medical, others, travel, and any other type you want to create, we can create those. So let's say, for example, there's some food bills that she wants to claim, right? I'll just come in here and we'll just create an account, for example. Let's say, let's put it under administrative expenses. Put it under administrative expenses, right? So let's say they claim, let's say 500 bucks in this as part of this expense claim on this particular project, right? And we'll just simply let me just use the
Oh, sorry.
yep, just add that particular piece in here, right? So like this, they can type of claim that is then raised into the system, right? Any possible claim that is raised into the system, they can track it. They can also add the soft copies of these under the attachment section, which you'll see, right? So this is the first piece where we are tracking the project's assignment. And once this assignment is done and the work has been completed, then Mel will go ahead and put this back into pending review, right? You'll put that back into pending review so that she can verify with the, management to see whether we can move this project to the next phase, right? So we'll keep this as pending review. When the work is completed, we'll just hit the completed button and this will be done. The system will ask us what date this is completed by. So let's say we completed this by the 20th, right? Right? So there are a lot of validations. So let's say whenever we completed this particular task, okay, then you can go back into your Kanban and you can see the progression of how your tasks are moving ahead, right? So it'll give you a complete bird's eye. Now I can see that this has now come under my completed task. Right? Now come under my completed task. And you guys just give me 1 minute. All right. So this is what's come under our completed task. And you can then track it in the same way for each and every part or phase of this particular project, of this construction project. So similarly, once your foundation is done, right? This will go under completed. Then you'll start your next phase, which is your concrete pouring. Then you'll start your curing. Now, another important thing is when we are doing the excavation, you may have hired some machinery from an external vendor, right? In that case, all you have to do is when the vendor sends you an invoice, simply when you're punching in that invoice, or rather when you're allocating the costs of that invoice. So let's say I got this particular machine from Summit Traders, right? And it could be any machine. I'll just let's say this is the name of the machine, just for example, right? This is the name of the machine. So let's say we were charged, kind of 50,000 bucks for that particular piece, right? We were charged 50,000. Now, what we can do is we can bifurcate these costs across the project very easily. So I'll just bring those critical fields up into the view here so that it's easy to tell. Okay. There you go. So now I want to allocate this entire 50,000 cost to my Frappe tower towards the excavation. All right. So it's like, I'll just change this. Right, sure. Change this and we'll excavation. So this is the foundation excavation. So I can allocate costs which are direct in this way, or let's say I've hired this particular machine, which could be like a excavator machine for the entire month, and I've used it not only for excavating, I've also used it for the first floor as well. In that case, what I can do is I can simply duplicate this line like so, right? I can simply duplicate this line like so, and I can allocate the cost, the remaining cost, to another one. So let's say it's first floor slab reinforcement, for example, and I want to allocate 25,000 here, and I want to allocate 25,000 here, and the remaining 25,000 here, right? So you can allocate your indirect costs as well. So these are what we consider as indirect costs. Now these could be rent. You could be doing your purchase invoice for rent. You could be doing a purchase invoice for any machinery that you've taken. You could be doing a purchase invoice for any kind of raw material you've purchased. So against this, let's say I've even purchased some raw material for the cementing part. So let's say I've bought cement, 100 kgs, for example, right? 100 kgs or 100 kgs of cement I have procured at let's say $50 a kg, right? I can then allocate this cost to a separate piece. For example, let's say on my first floor, this is for my column concreting, right? Column concreting is what I've purchased this cement for, or rather this is what it's being applied towards, right? So now using this particular mechanism, you can very easily go ahead and do your cost allocations based on both. Sorry. Let me just change the setting here. Let's put this into main. Perfect. Let's go ahead and submit that. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Give me 1 second. Some places giving us, there we go. So I'll just quickly change that piece as well. Let me just pull it up here so it's easier for us to see kind of what happens. And this is the kind of flexibility that the system gives you, wherein we can have multiple segments from where we can choose, what we want that value to be. So we can break up your EPC, kind of based on the project, based on the task. It could even be allocated amongst a department or a cost center and any other kind of segment that you feel is critical for this particular activity, right? So I'll go ahead, let me go ahead and quickly submit that. And now these costs have been allocated to that particular task, right? So as part of our effective cost management, if I want to track the cost of this particular project, very simple. I can simply, there's a host of different reports. For now, I'll be using the profit and loss report, right? And I can bifurcate my profit and loss. Let's use the right company, ABC, for example. I can bifurcate it by project. So if I want to see, all right, what is my P&L only for the Frappe Tower project? I can see that. And I can go ahead and allocate it to different costs like so as well, right? So all of these are like, all stock activities. Similarly for your balance sheet, right? So you can have project-wise balance sheets, you can have task-wise balance sheets, you can have balance sheet and any other financial statement based on departments and so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of different, flexibility that system gives you. So for example, I've just highlighted Frappe Tower. Now I can see that I have a minus 55,000 liability, which is for some stock that I am yet to bill, right? So I can drill down into that ledger directly from here. If I want to see the breakup as to where that amount has come from, I can see all the different, transactions which have taken place. And I can also drill down into the voucher through which this transaction was created. So if I want to trace the source of all these costs, I can just simply hit on the voucher, and this will give me a complete overview of all the bills that we have, entered, right, into the system for this purpose, and entered into the system for this purpose. Similarly, coming down here, this is what we just saw when it comes to assigning the task and tracking the time of the labor, right? Where we saw the timesheet piece. Now, from the timesheet as well, we just go ahead and hide this. From the timesheet as well, we've covered the direct costs, and from the purchase invoices, we have covered some of the indirect costs of this particular piece, right? We've also seen how we can progress the project simply by changing the status. So you can see now that my project is 1% completed, right? As I go ahead and complete different tasks. So for example, I have my, let's do it in this way, right? So I have, the excavation is completed. Then when we talk about the foundation, whenever that piece is completed, we would map that as well. And as soon as this is completed, when I go back into my project, or rather when I look at my project list, I can see that now from 1%, it has increased to 3%, right? So there's many ways in which the system helps us track the progress. And this progress can also be shown to external customers who are either planning to buy a property with us or have already bought a property with us. They will also be able to access the system as a website designer. We haven't, of course, loaded that into the system yet, but they can also access the system and they can view all the details about that particular project in terms of how much is completed and how much is not. A lot of the builders don't offer that option, but it definitely does create a sense of trust and transparency with any prospect customer who's going to come and buy your units or buy your property that you're building, right? So this is one of the key ways. Now you can see here that the system calculates accumulation of all the costs via timesheets, via the expense claims, via your purchase invoices, and kind of gives you a total cost that this project has at the moment, right? And you can very easily compare that with your estimated costs, which you have entered at the beginning before the project has been initiated, right? So you can then track the variance between the total costs of direct and indirect, as well as the estimated that we had before we started the project, when we were doing the project financing and project understanding, these kind of things. Okay, so I can see currently my gross margin is minus 450, which is fine because of course we haven't made any sale as of yet, right? We haven't made any sale as of yet. Now, during this construction, if you have any licenses, any compliance documents, or any kind of authorization letter, which you need to track as part of this project, we have a built-in file manager, right? So all your project-related documents, whether they're internal, whether they're external, they can be uploaded into the system. So, right, they can be uploaded into the system like so, and you can simply upload them in the click of a button, and they will always be as part of that project master. So anyone who wants to come into the project, let's say it's some kind of a sanction plan or a blueprint of that particular project, they can just come into the project. They'll see, okay, this is the blueprint. They can click on it and it will open the blueprint right away, right? It'll open the blueprint right away. So this is just, some of the ways that we have in order to test how this particular system can help you streamline your entire construction work of line, right? Now, against this particular project, or rather against this particular phase, so let's say we come into the phase where we are currently, let's go into the preview. So where we started on the ground floor, and so we started on the ground floor, and we are actively looking at kind of putting some, or rather procuring some cement, right? Now, when on the site manager may say, all right, we have this much cement with us, but I think it's going to finish by tomorrow. So it's very easy. What the site manager will do, they will raise a material requisition in the system, which can again be decentralized. So whether you have simply one site or whether you have multiple sites through which you can, through multiple sites where you're doing your work, you can very easily use this kind of tool on your phone again and simply say, okay, we require some cement. How much cement do we need? We need 100 kilos of cement by tomorrow or by the 18th. So this will simply be saved and submitted. Now, let's say this is on one of these sites, right? Similarly, there is another site which is requesting for, let's say, steel. So they want steel to be procured. Okay, they want steel to be procured by tomorrow. And this is, this is fine. So choose the right company. Apologies for that. Right, so they just want that this particular, steel is inverted into our stores, which is on my site, right? Which is on my site. So like this, people can raise multiple requisitions. Okay, people can raise multiple different requisitions. Let me just duplicate this and add cement as well. Cement as well. Yeah, maybe just, again, 100 kilos of, or rather 100 kilograms of cement. And this is now submitted. So now multiple supervisors can raise their own requisitions. And then the purchase team, all they have to do is have a centralized procurement system so that you can get maximum benefits of bulk purchasing, right? So now if I have,
Shashank, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just a time check.
yeah,
Yeah, that we are around 50 minutes over in the webinar. So maybe
all
we
right, no
can,
worries.
yeah, we should, I think we should keep some time for Q&A also.
For the Q&A, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me just complete the procurement flow, and then we'll just do a quick overview, maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll take up all your Q&A, right? So for centralized procurement, the procurement team can simply select all the open requisitions like so, and simply hit get items. So whatever the person on the site had requisitioned will automatically be fetched over here like this, right? And then we can simply send the PO to our supplier, or if we have some kind of blanket orders, and then all this material will then be inverted. So it's got a complete procurement flow starting from your requisitions, going into your centralized order. So your requisitions can be for multiple sites. You can create one centralized order. And once you get that order, then you will receive all your material within your warehouse or within your location, which you can then consume as part of that particular project, right? So that consumption will also be tagged to the project, and that cost will then be allocated towards a certain task and a certain project within that, right? Now you're building this beautiful building. Definitely, you're going to get a lot of inquiries. Could be over phone call, could be online. Maybe you've started some kind of social media campaign. So what our system allows you to do is to capture all these people who are interested as a lead within the system, right? And these leads can then be worked upon by your team, and you can track all the different activities that your salespeople are doing in order to try to convert this person into a customer, right? And when this particular lead is interested, or rather is agreed to buy a property from us, we can simply convert them into a customer with one single click of a button. It's that simple. And that's it. Once they're a customer, then against them, we can go ahead and book their order, right? So it could be that our building is currently in progress, and we've given them kind of a payment plan where they pay us maybe once every month for the next 1 year till the building is kind of ready, right? So we can do these kind of things using the capabilities of the system. Of course, it's a very broad system, so I think time has fallen a little short. I do apologize for that. But your entire flow, which covers capturing and converting your leads, managing any kind of quotations you want to give them, generating your sales order, and then finally billing them automatically based on their payment schedule. Right? So anyone buying a property from you would be paying you in installments, and those installments can very easily be managed within the system. And of course, you would know that all this data, all these transactions, they have a financial impact, which is then finally flowing into your accounting module. And those will reflect in all your different financial reports, whether it's your general ledger, whether it's your P&L, your balance sheet, your general ledger, your cash flow statement, your trial balance, so on and so forth, right? So in its essence, it's a tool which is very helpful to help us streamline the operations, streamline the costs, and also have an automated flow in terms of billing, customer management. And there was some parts relating to retention amounts that I wanted to discuss, but definitely, you can get in touch. There are some details. So if you have any queries, or rather if you have any, projects that you're undergoing, then we can definitely assist you in this regard. All right. So I think, Ankita, we can take up the question and answer. You want me to have a look at the question at the chat area here?
Yeah, I think everyone can just unmute themselves and ask the questions.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure. So, guys, I do appreciate. I see a couple of people saying that they're willing to continue. I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Unfortunately, we have some time restrictions as it's a webinar, so it's a timed webinar. But all my contact details are given here. You can get in touch with me, and we can continue our discussion. Which is personalized towards your project as well. So feel free to unmute, and any Q&A that you have, just let me know. Get that sorted. So we have one question from Vincenzo. Vincenzo says, all these functions that you show, are they standard? So absolutely, they are all standard. And you don't have to have any kind of customizations for any of the pieces that I've showed to you. That being said, of course, there are heavy use, or there are rather strong use cases where we can customize the system more using the inbuilt capabilities of the build module. So for those who don't know what the build module is, it helps you extend the feature sets of the system, gives you more automations, more modules, more features, simply from the front end itself, right? Very easy to, I mean, very, very nifty tool. I'm a fan of this particular piece of Frappe, and it's something unparalleled. So everything I've shown you so far is definitely included, or rather a standard part of the system. But if there's a strong use case for anything that you'd like to customize, we can get that done as well. No problem. Any other questions, guys? Feel free to put it in. We have a question from Dhruv. It says, how can we enable various vendors to directly submit quotes by logging in and compare all the quotes on the purchasing side? Very good question. And this is something that the standard system manages using the procurement module, or what we call as a sourcing cycle, right? A sourcing cycle. So what a sourcing cycle essentially does is it allows us to put a tender, right? It allows us to put a tender based on all the requisitions. And based on that particular tender, people, or rather suppliers who are participating in that tender, right? So for example, if I want to create an RFQ, I can create it through all the open requisitions that I have. So let's just take this one. For example, this is one open requisition. Now, this is the requirement. I have a requirement for 100 kgs of cement. And I want this particular bid to be done by 3 vendors, MA Incorporated, and who's the other fella here? Summit Traders, and of course, the third one is Zuckerman, right? So I want that all these 3 participate and send me quotations directly in the system, rather than me having to get it from them on email and then upload it and then compare it. So that makes no sense, right? So all we have to do is send out this particular RFQ. And once this RFQ is sent out, there's a particular role in the system called a supplier role. So what that allows us to, or rather what that allows the supplier to do, or your vendor, is automatically create this kind of a supplier quotation against the RFQ which you have released, right? Now, keep in mind that the supplier will not be able to see anyone else's quotation. They won't be able to see anyone else who is participating in that bid. All they will be able to do is simply bid in those tenders that they have been marked in. For example, this one, right? Now, let's say they charge a rate of 50 rupees per kilogram for 100 kilograms. And once all your quotations are in the system, then all you have to do is a very handy tool to do a quick comparison. Go into your supplier quotation report view, click on the select report, and then you can access your supplier quotation comparison report. I don't think I have any data at the moment. Unlikely that we have any data. But yes, this report does exist, and it's very easy to use this to compare all quotations in one go against a particular RFQ that you have released. So, Dhruv, I hope that answers your question. We have a question from Madhu. Is there any differentiation in WBS creation for engineering and purchase compared to construction? So yes, I mean, typically engineering kind of projects are not really construction. Rather, they come under, let's say, a manufacturing cycle, right? So if we do have, an engineering project where we are engineering, for example, could be anything, right? Could be some machinery. We could be engineering some equipment or whatever. In that case, we would more rely on the manufacturing module, right? We would more rely on the manufacturing module in order for us to be able to track the inputs or the raw materials that are being used, what output is being created, what is the cost of that output, where is it currently located, and all these other aspects when it comes to engineering. So the WBS is fairly different when it comes to construction as compared to engineering, but that again depends on your exact vertical, right? So if you're into a engineering line which is related more towards real estate, then the WBS may be more or less the same for construction as well as engineering. Right? Procurement more or less remains the same, whether you're doing it for engineering, whether you're doing it for construction, does not matter. At the end, construction, the procurement is a area which follows best practices in ERPNext, and it's kind of unified or uniform across all different industries. So Madhu, I hope that response was helpful. We have a question from Sandeep. Do we have task-based material stock keeping with reference to a specific task? Can we have task level authorization control? Task-based material stock. So rather, I would put this question, or rather, I would tell you an answer in a different way. It'll depend upon how we set up the warehouses and the tasks, right? So as part of the standard system, there may be a little it may be a little difficult to establish some kind of a link between your task and your warehouse, because warehouse is what our stock keeping unit is called as within ERPNext, right? So somewhere what you may have to do is you may have to create multiple warehouses for each task. And then within the task, we define the warehouse. So whenever, let's say we are procuring material against a particular task, automatically the system will kind of receive that material in the warehouse, which is linked to the task, right? So this is, let's say, for example, your, your warehouse view. So under this warehouse view, you would ideally then, you would need to have one warehouse for each task. And so that within each warehouse, you can quickly see what the stock balance is currently there. What is the stock valuation of material lying within that, within that task warehouse, and so on and so forth. Although I personally have not seen that kind of a flow. Normally, each site project is divided into various locations, and tasks are independent of those locations. So we could be doing an excavation task, but the material could be lying within, zone A of my site, right? So that is how we that is how I think it is. But yeah, definitely we can have that kind of authorization control on the task level as well, right? On the task level as well. So authorization on a task level is 100% there. It's something called as user permissions, which will give you that access control, right? So for those who are not aware, ERPNext is tremendous when it comes to access control and role-based security, right? One of the best in the world, I would say personally. And this is the engine which it uses. So for example, if I want to restrict Krishank, or if I want to restrict Mel only to use, or rather to have access to only the task of excavation, then I can just simply use this particular piece and say, okay, for this value. So now whenever Mel logs in with her ID and she tries to access any other task other than task number 13, the system will give her an error or try to restrict them. Right? So that is very much possible. Task-wise warehouses, there's no direct link at the moment, but if that is a very strong use case, we can have certain fields and link fields built on the task form so that we can link it and kind of automatically transfer material into that task linked warehouse whenever that kind of a purchase or issue transaction takes place. So I hope that that question, that answer was helpful to you. Do we have an option of tagging stock to projects? By default, no. So rather what we suggest to our clients is for each project, you create a separate warehouse, right? So whenever you're receiving material, if you put it into that warehouse, there is no chance that that material by mistake can be reused in some different project or on some different site, right? So we create project-wise warehouses, and within those project-wise warehouses, which is our header, we have multiple sub-locations if we want to track it. So Directly, there is no option to tag a stock to a project. Rather, what we do is we create project-based warehouses, which will give you the same level of control that you need when you're tagging a stock directly to a project itself, right? So everything related to stock is centered around the warehouse in the system. And because this warehouse is so critical, this is somewhere that you should spend more time in evaluating and understanding and analyzing what kind of a warehouse structure is required in your implementation, right? So this warehouse structure should enable you to restrict users from cross-utilizing any kind of raw material or any kind of consumable into projects for which that particular piece was not purchased. So if we bought 100 kgs of cement, we allocated the cost to project A, right? But in reality, there we have another project B, which is ongoing. The user would just take the material and start using it in project B. To avoid these kind of things, we need to create virtual distinctions in the warehouse so that these kind of issues are resolved. Great. So I hope, Sandeep, that was helpful to you. Any other questions? Guys, we have another 5 minutes or
I
so.
think there's a question in the chat box by Umair. With the cost you have mentioned, like 50 USD, are you going to manage the ERP for our business? So, and set up all our concerns like CRMs, finance, DMS, etc.
Where's this? Sorry, is this Mohammed? Mohammed, I'm not really sure where where the 50 USD is mentioned. I'm a little confused. Maybe you can just help me elaborate on this. And if you have whatever your requirement is, kind of just feel free to reach out to me on either of these areas, and we'll definitely see how we can help you set that up. Right, not a problem. So you can reach out over WhatsApp, you can reach out to Frappe, you can reach out over email, multiple ways. Right. So I'm not sure which $50 you're referring to, but yeah, definitely we can definitely help you with setting this up and doing all your CRM, finance, TMS or transport management, etc., etc. How can we create a BOQ? BOQ is let's say a BOQ in our case, right? In our case, is similar to a material requisition, right? So we've called it material requisition over here, and a BOQ in this, in this sense is pretty much a list of materials that will be required for this project, right? All the materials that will be required for this particular construction for each phase. Each phase can have its own BOQ. In the system, we kind of manage that using the material requisition itself. So all the materials that are part of our BOQ, right? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat that, please? Okay, I think that was just a misfire. No worries. So we normally just create the BOQ over here. So against a particular project, if I have or whatever items I will be planning to use, right, can all be fetched in here itself. And then once that is completed, then against the BOQ, or rather the material requisition, then we can create our sourcing cycle. We can get quotations from multiple vendors. We can send them a PO. We can receive material either partially, fully. We can do billing, payments, reconciliation, the whole lot. So BOQ is kind of blended over here. For manufacturing companies, or rather for manufacturing or engineering companies, there's a separate BOQ tool called as a BOM. It's not really a BOQ because BOQ is just a list of all the inputs that are required. A BOM has inputs, outputs, as well as operations that are going to be taken place. So there's a slight difference between both the terminologies, but I understand where you're coming from, right? So like an anonymous attendee has also mentioned, how do we record the BOQ, which includes items and services for the project? It's the same way. We simply use the material request. And for those who are wondering, how do we manage services in this? Do keep in mind that the item master that we have within ERPNext it's not only valid for stock items or asset items. It's also for any kind of service that you may require. Could be consulting, could be license fees or any other thing like that, right? So this is kind of a tentative BOQ that you can manage. And we've also, in certain projects, we have created new customizations for the BOQ purposes, especially when the use case was a little different, wherein we are tracking the BOQ against the quantity received and such and such. So we can either go with a custom form for tracking the BOQ, or we can, as a workaround, use your material request, and it'll have a similar effect based on what kind of output you're trying to achieve, right? Yeah. Yeah. Do we make an estimation? Yes. So there is a tool called as the quotation tool, right? It's, or rather, the quotation list. And this is, or rather, this is an estimation tool which we can use to estimate all the material requisitions that we have, right? So typically, estimation has become an activity which does a lot of cost allocations and such. So we don't have a tool like that inbuilt into the system which can do a project estimation for us. Rather, whatever project costs we are envisioning, we can have a record of that, and we can track that against the actuals. That is something that can happen. But estimations work a little differently in EPC. They require a lot of automated allocations. They have many different cost heads, which sometimes we may not be able to capture. So for those, we always have a customized approach, which we prefer, right? Yeah. So the estimated cost, estimated quantity, these things are something that we double up in our material requisition itself. So it kind of acts like a BOQ. Kind of acts like a BOQ. That's the crux of it. So whenever we're dealing in technology, right, guys, we should remember that try to reduce the number of clicks as much as you can. Try to reduce the number of documents that you need to maintain as much as you can. So if you have a form like a material requisition, which by adding a couple of fields or columns here and there, we can double up as an estimation. Do that, right? Don't create more steps in the process, because when the users start using it, it creates a lot of issues in on their side as well. From a system perspective, it may seem nice, but we try to double up whatever we have already and kind of reuse it for that purpose, right? So just to answer that question, what I would do is, on my requisition, I would create some more columns over here, right? So for those who don't know how to create columns, Frappe has a lot of material on that online. You can have a look, but we can add these kind of columns into this document so that we can track those details here as well, right? So the estimated cost, the estimated quantities, if these are all fields that you want to track against your BOQ, this will become the name of your BOQ, followed by the quantity that we envision for that particular project. And we can have another field for the, for the prospect or the target rate that we're looking at, and so on and so forth, right? A lot of our customers also do reverse bidding. So they have a, let's say they've set the price of cement at 50 rupees a kilo, and that's the maximum they're willing to spend. So whenever after the requisition they raise an RFQ, right, we can have certain customizations where the supplier, if they try to put in a quotation for above 50 rupees per kilo, the system may restrict them, right? So this will also give you that extra level of control, where based on your BOQ estimates, your actual quotations are not so far off, right? They're kind of just within that range. We can add different kind of allowances, percentages, which will allow us to kind of, if we have set a limit or cap rate of 50, it'll allow us up to 55 or maybe 45 and things like that. So there's a lot we can do with the system. Yeah, so there's a lot we can do in terms of how we manage these kind of BOQs. And that'll honestly purely depend upon the consultants that you are working with in order to set the solution up, right? How do we do intercompany transfer for stocks? It is also required to be reflected in both balance sheets as well. Right. So that is, I mean, so we wouldn't be covering that today, but just to let you know, every time you create a supplier, okay, on a customer, you can tag them as an internal party if you like, right? So let's say within my system, I have two companies which I'm tracking. I can create this person as an internal supplier. And what this means is that this supplier will represent one of my own companies. So if I have company ABC and another company ABC Demo, right? Then in that case, it's very easy to set this up where we set up an internal supplier, we set up an internal customer. So as soon as we do some kind of a billing transaction, wherein we create a sales in company A for some stock to be transferred to company B, then what will happen in company A, that stock will be, we call it as consumed. So it will be issued from our system or our stock, and automatically the system will make a purchase invoice in the books of company B. And when they punch in the purchase invoice, that same stock will be created in their warehouse. So that's kind of how we show that transfer happening. You know, that's kind of how we show that transfer happening, where it reduces from one, goes to the other. And yeah, so it will reflect in the trial balance, of not of both. It'll reflect in one, because in one of the organizations, that stock has been issued or rather consumed, and in the other one it's been created. So in the balance sheet of one, that stock will reduce. In the balance sheet of the other, the stock will increase. That's what will happen, right? So we don't need any kind of elimination when it comes to stock transfers. Rather, elimination and all these kind of entries that we do for intercompany, we do in terms of those transactions which have some kind of profitability element in it, right, or value added element in it. That's anyway a topic for a whole different day and a whole different time. So that's essentially how we manage internal transfers between our own companies as a sales and a purchase transaction. There's a couple of more questions, so we'll just take the couple of last few ones. If we need any laborers like drivers, how can we handle? Very good question, Nikhil. We have a complete HR tool. So everything from hiring those laborers to managing their life cycle, managing their performance, managing their attendance and leaves, and also managing their entire payroll and salary. Everything can be done through the system. There's a lot of demos again by Frappe online, which show how the HR and payroll work in a lot of detail. So this is one of those ways you can do that. Similarly, if the laborers and engineers are outsourced from some different vendor, in that case, it's a simple purchase transaction for us. So if there are people on our payroll, if we've hired them, we have the entire HR payroll suite. If we have not hired them, we have taken them on contract basis, then we have the buying or the accounts payable flow, which you will follow in that case. I hope that answers your question, Nikhil. Darit, we have a question. The BOQ before starting a project to bid with competitors. So that's more like a format that you require. So maybe this is something we can discuss particularly to your requirements later on, as to how that BOQ should be, how you want that BOQ to be generated and sent to your customers as part of a bid, right? So your customer may have, a requirement to build some kind of machinery for which you will give a BOQ and rates and everything. So how we do that in the system, of course, you saw through the quotation module. So the BOQ is nothing but a quotation which lists down all the different elements that we will be providing to our customer in order to try to win this particular bid, right? Now, exactly in the quotation, what kind of details you want to track, what kind of data you want fetched from any other kind of opening or any other kind of requirement, that is something which will change from implementation to implementation. So yeah, so we can take that up case to case based on your exact case. All right, I think if we need any laborers like drivers for a particular project, is there any direct connection? Yes, absolutely, right? So we saw the timesheets, for example. So when you fill in the timesheet, right? When you fill in the timesheet, every person over here has a cost. So it's called as activity activity type, right? So whenever we're looking at a particular cost that we want to allocate to a project, especially labor related cost, right? Labor related cost, you will see here you can track activity cost per employee. So for example, the amount you're paying the driver will be different. The amount you're paying your engineers will be different. The amount you're paying very different people will be different, right? So you can track each of those employees, your drivers, your engineers, and you can track their rate of, or rather their costing rate based on their salary. If someone's getting a salary of 100,000, rupees a month, right? 100,000 rupees a month, then that divided by 30, or that divided by the number of working days, divided by the number of working hours, will become the costing rate of that employee. And whenever we fill a timesheet against that employee, that cost will automatically be allocated to your project. So that's the beauty wherein we don't actually have to, physically manage. All you have to do is have your site manager update the timesheets of the employees, and that's all. Your project costs will be inlined in terms of driver, engineer costs. And of course, this is related to HR for salary processing and things like that, right? So, so salary processing and everything can happen through your timesheets, or can happen based on the project. And that kind of project-based billing is mainly done when we're doing kind of not really construction projects, rather time and material-based kind of projects. So whether your construction project is fixed cost or whether it's time and material based, both kind of flows can be managed within the system. All right, perfect. So
I think we need to, sorry to interrupt, but I was liking all the entire Q&A session which was happening, but I think just a time check that we are almost through with the time of the webinar.
It's time for the next call, I think.
No, that's not the case, but I think it was a great session. Thank you, Krishak, for joining in and sharing your valuable insights and showing us a quick demo also for a company in the EPC industry. It was really helpful of how we can actually implement it in ERPNext just using the core modules itself and not doing any customization. So that is really nice to see. And also I could see there are a couple of questions we have still missed out in between in the chat box. So in case anyone has any queries, they can reach out to Krishak directly, or you can also email us or in our revenue team. We will try to answer your questions. Also, we can redirect you to Krishak as well. Moreover, we have also shared a feedback form in the chat box. So please share us your valuable feedback, so that it will help us to schedule more webinars like this, and it will help us also improve of what should be included in these webinars and how we can improve it. Overall, thank you everyone for joining in, and apologies for the session to go for this long. But it was a really wonderful session, and I hope it was insightful for all of you as well. So thank you everyone for joining in. And thank you, Krishak. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a good
Thanks
day.
for the opportunity. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.